Greetings, Cape of Good Hope District, watching on YouTube, watching on Facebook. It is good to have you online with us. This is a little bit of a no, it's not an experiment, but this is the first time we're doing this. So we are hoping that all goes without any hitches. But certainly we can see that there are people connected, and this is wonderful. So if I can introduce myself, I'm Reverend Jenny Hillebrand. I'm the District Supervisor of Studies. I am trying not to stress right now, but we have other people in the studio with us also trying not to stress. And so I'm going to introduce them. Grant, if you can bring them up. I don't know if you can. Oh, they're all there at once. So there we go. You will see the Bishop, Reverend Yvette Moses. You will see our District Secretary, Reverend Graham Goodwin. You will see our lay leader, Mr. Michael Jikajela, and you will see, Lester, do you have a title? You're in our mission unit. Okay, I hope you're muted because we can't hear you. And Lester Cedrus from our mission unit. We will be guiding you through the program. And I can see all the people that are saying hello. I can't possibly greet you all, but if you are greeting in the name of a circuit, I will say hello. So I can see that the Helderberg circuit is there, and I will say hello, Helderberg circuit. Good to have you. I can cheat, and I can see there are people from Tigerberg circuit, but they don't say Tigerberg. And sorry, Grant? Dumasani. Okay, Grant is our technical expert. He's telling me there's Dumasani. Greetings to Dumasani Circuit. And there's Tigerberg Circuit. Greetings, Tigerberg Circuit. And Victoria Road Circuit. Wonderful to have you online with us. I am going to hand over to our bishop and ask her if she will lead us in prayer as we get going.
Good evening, all, and what a special privilege to share in this training event this evening. Let us commit our hearts and minds to God in prayer. We are reminded in Paul's letter to the Ephesians that the various roles within the church are given that we might be built up to the full measure of Jesus Christ. And that ultimately is our aim, that we would be equipped to the full measure of Christ. And so this evening, loving God, we gather in order to acknowledge that we belong to you, an awesome God, a great God, a good God, a God who is far beyond our own thoughts, our understanding, and even our imagination. But you are God who time and again enters even into our space, making yourself known in the most amazing ways. Today we come to honor you. We come to give you thanks for the gift of a discipleship, a movement, a people who are called by your name to share within your life, to share within the kingdom work throughout the world. Thank you that this movement of discipleship, which we know as the church, is given not just for our good, but essentially for the good of the world. We confess this evening, loving God, that we are fragile, that we are often broken, that we often miss the mark, and that we do willfully sin. And yet you are a God of grace who calls us again and again to walk with you. And so this evening we pray that as we gather, that we would recognize your spirit amongst us, that we would engage with each other in the spirit of love, the spirit of companionship, and with a deep desire to serve you in whatever way we're able to. Especially as a leadership, we come before you. I want to give you thanks for all that are in any way involved in leadership within our churches, particularly now whether we gather to be lay people and those who would share amongst us. We thank you for circuit stewards, society stewards, leaders in any capacity. Help us, we pray, that as we explore what it means to be equipped within this body of Christ. Help us to seek you more than anything else. Help us to walk closer to you. Enable us to have a deep desire to do as we are commanded by Micah, to do justice, to love mercy, and walk humbly with our God. We pray this in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you so much, Bishop. We really appreciate your taking the time to be here and your leadership. And yes, all circuit stewards and society stewards and the ministers that are online. I think we appreciate your being here, being part of it. And of course, that the bishop is here saying how important it is, the role of the society stewards. So I just want to greet also here Table View, Cape West Coast, Wynberg, another Victoria. There's Heathfield. I know that Heathfield have got load shedding, so well done there. False Bay Circuit, good to have you. And there's Bongani, more Cape West Coast, Paarl Valley, wonderful. Blue Down Circuit, great stuff. That's Table Bay Circuit, more Paarl, Strand, that's from Helderberg, Cape Gateway Circuit. The Namaqualand Circuit, wonderful to have you with us from all the way up there. Stellenbosch Circuit, Belleville Circuit. Okay, and that's as far as we've got. Graham, you can tell us if anybody's missing. It sounds wonderful. Please pass this on to others that are not able to be here now. They can watch the recording later. Right, we are going to have 4 speakers who are going to speak for approximately 15 minutes each on different topics. We are going to do our best to take questions at the end. So you are free to put questions in the chat, and we will deal with them after we have all spoken. And we hope that we will not be overwhelmed. But I think let's just see how it goes. Grant, my husband, is our tech person. He's in the background here, and he will help to keep track of all of this. So I'm up first. So I'm going to ask Grant if he can let the others go to sleep for a little while. And I'm going to speak about stationing. And he's going to bring up my PowerPoint. Thank you. And there we go. I think stationing is the most complex of the things that we're going to be looking at this evening. And so I thought we would do this first while our brains are still fresh. In some ways, I may be speaking at a slightly elementary level. You maybe are going to say, no, we all know this. But I think sometimes there are people that don't know it, and we just want to try and at least get some things us on the same page. I will not be able to cover every aspect of stationing, and the bishop particularly will be there just to catch me if there's anything she disagrees with, because she obviously has to deal with this on an almost daily basis. And so it's important from her point of view that we do actually get everything correct. Now, I'm going to start just with this page from the yearbook. Those of you that know, every year the Methodist Church puts out a yearbook. It's used to be called the Minutes of Conference in the old days. It's now called the yearbook, and it has the record of conference, and it also has the record of the circuits. And so if you were to see this page, you would see that there is the name of the circuit on the top. That's the Cat Valley Circuit and the Hilltown Circuit and the Port Elizabeth West Circuit, and we all know which circuits we are from. And then this word station, which you see on the right-hand side, for anybody that is still wondering about train stations or where this word station comes from, well, maybe it did originally come from a train station, but within a circuit you have stations. And so you can see there that in the Cat Valley Circuit there is the St. John's United Station and the Fort Beaufort and Seymour Station. I'm not sure if you can read it any better than I can. It is quite small. In the Port Elizabeth West Circuit, you'll see there's the Newton Park Station, the Walmer Station, the Westring Station, the Lorraine Station. So I am sure that you can think in your circuit what your stations are. These are the stations. They may be societies, they may be groups of societies. You may not even divide your ministers among societies. They may just work in the circuit. And then we have this thing called an agent. So on the left-hand side there, you'll see that Reverend Chomela in the Cat Valley Circuit is an agent. And we'll talk a little bit more about the different sorts of agents. But you will hear we talk about agents and agency. We talk about circuits, and we talk about stations. And these are part of our lingo of the Methodist Church. I can't ask my husband to change the slide. I need to do that. So let me just find it and change the slide. Here we have an example from another part of the yearbook where it shows the minister. This minister particularly happens to be Clive Calder. And I just want you to see on the right-hand side there where it records the years in circuit. That is, it's added to 1+1 every year. And you know, an agent is appointed to a circuit for a certain number of years. And you're always interested in how long has this agent been in the circuit? And so Reverend Calder has been in that circuit for 8 years, whenever this yearbook was from. Okay, it's not current. Don't go and think that he is. I think it was maybe last year's yearbook. So that's just another thing to know, the years in circuit. Right, next page. Now we have different types of agent. So on this screen, we've got back to our old Cat Valley circuit and so on. If you see the name of a station, that means that the agent in that station, okay, you're getting this. So the agent in the station is what we call a presbyter. I'm not sure if we're moving away from presbyters, but that is a minister who's ordained to word and sacrament. That is basically what we know as a minister who is able to officiate over the sacraments, over Holy Communion and over baptism. Okay, so if you see the name of a station, that means that it's a ordained, well, not an ordained minister necessarily, but a minister. In the next one down, you see it says not the name of a station, but it says evangelist. So that person who is named there is an evangelist, as a member of the Order of Evangelists and Bible Women. It could say Bible woman rather than evangelist. That is also a type of agent. They are not an ordained minister. They are evangelists or Bible women. Going further down, you will see that there are there's a deacon there, and the deacon is somebody ordained to word and service. They may not officiate over the sacraments, but they are involved in virtually every other aspect of ministry in the church. But they tend to have a preference for pastoral work and for being amongst the people. In that list, you will also see supernumerary ministers. They are retired ministers. They are not stationed. They just happen to live in that circuit. And we like to keep track of our retired ministers, and so their names are there, but we do not station retired ministers. They are retired. So if you look at my little block there on the left-hand side, I say the medical team may consist of different partners. So, if you go to a clinic or a place, you might find that there's a GP, there might be nurses, there might be paramedic, a carer or a number of carers, surgeons, even depending on what sort of medical practice it is. And you know that there are all these different sorts of people. And really, that's how our agents work, that we may create a ministry team in the circuit. So our ministry team may have a presbyter, the minister of word and sacrament, or several of them. There may be deacons. There may be order of evangelists and Bible women, and what we call probationers, any one of those that are still in training. You also will have youth workers, lay pastors, supernumerary ministers, and other people, all part of the ministry team, but they are not stationed. Okay, the ones on the top part of that block are people that are appointed to stations by the church. So when we talk about stationing, we're not only talking about ministers, but we maybe need to remember that there are other people that we could include in the ministry team. And we really are, I think, pushing to try and to include people more of the different sorts in the sense of a team ministry. Right, we need to talk about cost of agency. We have to talk about budget. When we're talking about stationing, when we're talking about who's going to be in our ministry team, we need to be realistic that we need to be able to pay them. And so let me just say that we will make these slides available. You don't have to be memorizing all of this. I hope that much of this you already know, but I think we just need to put it very clearly for each person to see. That there's a basic stipend, this is now for a minister, which is specified in the yearbook every year, specified by conference. You may not pay less than the basic stipend. Then a circuit will usually give an additional stipend, saying that we're not just going to pay our ministers the bare minimum, but in actual fact, we're going to add a little bit. And in many cases, this is the same as the basic stipend. But this is not mandated. This is up to the circuit being realistic. Traveling allowance, there's a recommended amount each year. Again, it's not mandated, but it's wise for the circuit to be realistic. There must be enough money for the minister to be able to do their work. You also need to, for a minister of word and sacrament or a minister of word and service, provide housing, whether it's in the form of a manse or a housing allowance, and also usually to pay the utility bills, that's the electricity and the water and so on. Also need to pay pension. So that's through the connectional fund, and that is a set percentage of the stipend, and also now a medical aid subsidy. So when we talk about, who we're going to have in the circuit, it is important to look at this, to realize that it's not always helpful for a minister to be living on the edge if you want them to be productive, but also it's not helpful to commit to paying something that the circuit really can't afford to pay. Unfortunately, money is the reality, but maybe fortunately, faith is our reality too. And we maybe need to go a little bit more boldly into our futures. Different agents have got different recommended amounts, and this is a little bit work in process as people are working through exactly how this all fits together. In my bottom right-hand block, please, there is no magical external source of funding. This comes from the circuit and thus from the societies. We can read in books or newspapers about missionaries who are supported from some external fund, and there's some magical way in which they achieve money. And we sometimes think that the church has got this great big fund of money that they can help us pay our ministers from. There is no magical other source. The only place money comes from is from the circuit and from the people. And so we need to be realistic in our budgeting. When we look at this, we need to say, well, how much can our people give? Again, with faith as well, but to realize that we can't just complain because it's us. It's like you've got your budget, you're going to buy bread, you're going to buy milk, you're going to pay for a doctor, you make a budget and you decide to go and spend it. And so we do exactly the same in the church. Right, I think I'm starting to get to the end of the general stuff. One more general thing. Your circuit profile. What would you like to see happening in your church? What does it look like? Where would you like to see your circuit and your society in 5 years' time? Do you want change? Do you want stability? Do you need a motivator, a uniter and a reconciler? What sort of minister do you need or evangelist in your context? How is your circuit different to other circuits? How about diversity in the ministry team? Do you have different races, genders, ages, and so on? What can you afford financially? And what can you afford not to lose? Because you can say, I can't afford to go to the doctor. But if you have lost the circulation in your feet and you don't go to the doctor, you will lose your foot. And so the same thing, you might say, we cannot afford an agent. We cannot afford. However, it does mean that you're likely then to lose something in your circuit that you value. So to think about those things. There is a standard profile form which should be completed and kept on file in the circuit or society and in the district office. You can get that from Letitia, email her at the district office, and in fact, we can ask for that to be sent out to all ministers who can pass on to all society stewards. So I think we will do that. Right. If there are questions, now please do let the questions come. I see lots of greetings and not too many questions, so I think we're doing okay. I have 4 minutes left to speak through this. Please, this is all in the Book of Order. You can find it there. This is kind of summarized, but just to give you an overview of the sort of thing that you need to do. So you need to first note, if you're a circuit steward particularly, but if you're a society steward, you tell the circuit steward or whatever, note when a minister has 2 years left in their circuit. If they've been invited for 5 years and they've used up 3 years, they've got 2 years left. If they're a conference appointment and they've been there for 1 year, they've got 2 years left. And at that point, you need to start thinking about what's going to happen in the future. What is going to happen with that station? What are you going to do? You cannot start any sooner than that 2 years. Okay, so you can't start inviting your minister when you've just invited them. You have to wait until they've got 2 years left. And the process needs to be finished by about 8 months before the end of the current appointment. In other words, before the April of the final year of the minister. Okay, I don't know if that sounds complicated, but it shouldn't be. Just when you've got the time, look at it carefully, and it's not that complicated. Once you have realized what is happening, that you need to talk about this minister's station, the circuit steward should remind the bishop. The bishop, is particularly in our district, is very much on the ball and will probably remind you. But there are times when things slip, and it's your responsibility, circuit stewards, to remind the bishop to say this person's appointment is coming up. They will usually approach the minister to find out what the minister has in mind. If the minister's decided, no, they're moving on, then you don't even need to consider them for the future. But if the minister says, no, you know what, I'm happy here, you know, I can consider staying, then you know that you must put that into your planning. Okay. The circuit stewards will then convene a meeting with the superintendent and with the society stewards of the affected stations. Okay, so that Fort Beaufort and Seymour, if we were looking at that station, we would get the society stewards from them with the circuit stewards and the superintendent. If you're talking about the superintendent station, then you must get the bishop. Okay, so now you must think plenty of time in advance, because you know that the bishop's diary is heavy going. Okay. Then number 3, this meeting with the stewards is to check the society profiles. So at this point, if the society hasn't done a profile, you say, please profile. To speak about the future needs of the society, to talk about financial concerns, to talk about broad issues. You're not going to make a list of ministers or anything at this point. This is where you just chat. You get a feel of what's happening, where they're going. For the circuit stewards, the superintendent, to have a sense of what's happening in the circuit, and particularly in those societies. And then at this meeting, you will elect 3 to 5 society stewards to be on the stationing committee. So the stationing committee will then be the superintendent or the bishop, the circuit stewards, and those 3 to 5 society stewards. Okay. I will speak a little bit about conference appointments and so on in a moment. Your stationing committee now exists, and they're going to draw up a list of possible ministers in consultation with the bishop. So the circuit stewards and so on, you'll chat to the bishop. It's very important to keep the bishop aware, not because she wants to control, but because she needs to know, so that if too many people are doing the same thing, she can tell you there's no point in all 15 circuits trying to talk to this minister. He's already somewhere else or whatever. So the bishop can help make intelligent decisions. So that is the reason for involving her throughout the process. But you will then draw up that list of names. The bishop will add names and so on. Then, this is easy to say, not always so easy to do. Number 5, if the current minister is not to be approached, so if you decide not to re-invite the minister currently in the station, please let them know so that they can start looking for another job. Okay, that's not how we see it, but they need to know that they must be available. Now you take your list. You may have some informal way of just checking with the ministers if they're available. Please, 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 this is the role of the circuit steward. And if the superintendent is involved, that's fine. But society stewards, please, cannot all go and send messages to ministers all over and say, are you available? Because the next thing is we have ministers all thinking that they're coming to the Tygerberg circuit or whatever it might be, and it's confusing. And so we work through the circuit stewards. One of their main jobs is this idea of stationing. And so if you're a circuit steward, you know that you need to take ownership of this, and to make sure that you approach ministers one at a time without causing chaos or disillusionment or any sort of sadness. Okay, so you've got your list of ministers. You then send out, and I'm actually well over time, so I'm going to say you send out a letter of inquiry The minister will respond either yes or no. Within 14 days, you can get the details from the book, copy the bishop, both bishops, bishop of this district and the bishop from the other district. If the minister says no, or the minister doesn't reply in 14 days, you go to the next name on the list. If they say yes, you take it to your circuit quarterly meeting, and you must then vote. And if all goes well and the vote is in favor of, you may then tell the minister that this has been approved, and within 7 days, tell the bishop that it has been approved. And we normally ask the minister to reply, even though it's not actually in the LND, but it's have the minister reply, just so that we know all the loops are closed. If the meeting votes against, the minister and the local bishop must be informed, and then you go back to your list and you start again with letters of inquiry. 11, if time has run out and you're in the April of the final year, or if the station committee chooses not to invite a minister, the connectional executive will place a minister in the station. This is actually quite straightforward. I know that I'm going through it quickly. You will get these notes, and it is in the Book of Order. An appointment by the connectional executive or conference is for 3 years. An invitation is usually for 5 years initially. It may also be to extend the conference appointment to 5 years. Invitations may be repeated, but never more than 5 years at a time. I say there, be careful about reducing agency. You want to say, we don't want a minister at all. Be careful, it should be a last resort. Probationers may not be invited. You may say, we choose to have a probationer, please. We can't say who, but we choose because we believe we can offer a good training environment. There is a district stationing committee which coordinates all of the stationing across the district. And then lastly, these notes are an overview. Please refer to the Book of Order for detail when going through the stationing process. And you will find that people have been through this and are able to assist. If you need help, ask for help. Right, I am 4 minutes over my time, so I am going to take a deep breath, and I'm going to ask Michael to come in next. He's going to speak about the lay leader and something for the presiding bishop. So, Michael, change of pace, change of face.
Thank you, Reverend Jenny, and good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Chigijela. I'm currently the lay leader in the district. Rev asked me to speak about the lay leader. The lay leader in the Methodist Church, it came about some years ago. The MCSA asked the question and penned it down to paragraph 5.2 of Appendix 5 of Laws and Discipline in the 12th edition of 2016, where the Methodist Church asked, how can we free our clergy to exercise their calling to preach and teach and give spiritual guidance? Then the Methodist Church responded with the resolution of sorting new ways or model of doing mission. One of these ways or model is the model of the priesthood of all believers. This model creates space to promote acceptance of coexistent and shared leadership between clergy and laity. So the MCSA upholds the co-equal and mutual dependent role of lay and ordained ministers, yet accords a special responsibility to those who are called and set aside to the ordained ministries. So a lay leader is a member of the Methodist Church in any society who has been nominated as a lay leader in the synod and then appointed for a 3-year term and may be re-elected for a further term. A lay leader forms part of the connectional executive together with the district bishop. Lay leader also forms part of the district management and the district executive. And there may be other committees that the lay leader will be involved with, such as stationing, finance committee, as delegated by the bishop of the district. So there are guidelines of the lay leader. You would find them from 6.241 of the Book of Order until 6.29. So the guidelines do specify the role of the lay leader, like it is to represent the views and interests of the church and its members throughout the district, to be an advisor to the bishop and the district executive, to advocate for greater involvement of laity, for the district to focus on issues facing the church, and also to facilitate dialogue and missional and organizational issues. There's a lot more, but one of the things that in our district we do, it is to focus on educative focus, conscientizing and informing laypersons on critical church and social matters. One of the things that we have been doing for a long time in the Cape District is lay training on this year that will be on the 25th of February in Goodwood Methodist. Fortunately, we have society and circuit stewards here. We do invite you. The poster will be out soon. May you please come in numbers. We try to do mostly educative stuff there. The training is always wonderful. So we do extend an invite to all society and circuit stewards, even other leaders in the society and the circuit. But it will be inappropriate for me not to mention that there are myths around this responsibility. I have had people calling a lay leader a bishop of lay people. That is not true. There is only one bishop in each district. In our district, we have Reverend Moses, who is our chief pastor and is doing a sterling job in this district. So a lay leader forms part of the office of the bishop. And also there's another assumption about the lay leader that is responsible for all organization in the district. That is also not so true. Organizations have their own district committees and their presidents who are accountable for those organizations. However, a lay leader is there to assist when he or she is needed. On that note, I think I should move to the presiding bishop's address. Is that okay, Reverend?
Yep.
All right.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So in conference 2022, our presiding bishop invited us to continue the journey of reimagination with our platforms of work for the ensuing connectional year. The sub-theme for this year is remaining in the love of Christ. In her charge to conference, she urged us to be true to who we are as a Church of Jesus Christ, a movement that is called to spread holiness, transformation, and healing. We need to keep listening and hearing God's call in our lives for the times such as we are experiencing. She made a remark, in our human desires, individuals and collectives, we focus on doing instead of being. Presiding bishop says the call to reimagine holiness demands that we both focus on who we're becoming and what we are doing. Using the powerful image of an umbilical cord, we're invited to bind ourselves intimately with Christ, nourished and held and unfolded into his being. The presiding bishop challenged MCSA to go back to put emphasis on two practices that she considered to be key in our remaining in the love of Christ. It was prayer and accountability groups like classes and small groups. To touch base on prayer, the presiding bishop said prayer is central to remaining in the love of Christ. It was central to Jesus Christ remaining in the love of his Father. And PB made the call to the conference, pleading with us fellow Methodists that, I quote, "Let us go back to the practice of prayer in our churches. I know it has become a cause of embarrassment and ridicule among us. Those of us who have spiritual gift of prayer, clergy or lay, are shunned and called names. How I wish our societies and circuits and district were to have prayer groups, intercessors who would soak our church in prayer," unquote. So if I would put more emphasis, Rev, on this, I think there is nothing more to say, but to those societies and circuits, we should really do not take it for granted that we have these people who are gifted in prayer. Let us use their gifts and not drag them down. The second one was accountability groups. In some societies, they call them cell groups or class or small group. In our Wesleyan heritage, small groups or class meeting are meant to cultivate mutual accountability for growth and holiness. They are meant to be nurturing communities where members share about their growth and faith and about the state of their souls, care and get cared by one another. Presiding bishop did say that these small groups seems to be slowly dying in many societies. We encourage society stewards, circuit stewards to revive these small groups, especially in areas where they are no longer taking place. She also spoke about the focus areas that were agreed upon on 2021, that these focus areas remain urgent. Those were poverty and food security, education, gender based violence, and femicide. Then she spoke about the state of the MCSA. The presiding bishop said that there are areas that she believed we urgently need to work on as individuals and as a community as she reflect on the state of our church. And she said none of these are new, but they affect our prophetic ministry and cause pain and hurt to the body. One of them is absenteeism and separation. That it was during lockdown that churches had to be closed down to save people. We had to learn to worship in our homes as families, but it has become comfortable to worship at home, not to worship at all. Many of our members have stopped attending worship services. This is slowly destroying us as it is not good for our collective spiritual well-being. It is in worship that together we will encourage to one another in faith and spare one another in doing good. She said, technology has its time and space, but communal worship remains important to the life of believers. So, to society stewards and circuits, if there are still societies that are meeting virtual only, you are encouraged to look into this. And to those ministers, PB asked them to remember their calling and take good care of God's people. The second one was division and lack of cohesion. The missional strength of the Methodist Church has always been its structural configuration of connectionality. This structure was designed to facilitate an interdependent and interconnected system of the elements of the church that work for common purpose. So, connectionalism, PB described it as a glue that holds the Methodist Church everywhere and enables cooperation and collaboration and partnership. On the very same issue, she spoke about the mistrust and suspicions of the MCO and or maybe the current staff of the MCO. She therefore asked the conference, amongst the things, to appoint a trusted and knowledgeable team that will review the MCO, what it does and how it does, its relevance to the well-being and future of the MCSA. It is therefore imperative that we prioritize addressing this mistrust of the MCO, she said. The PB spoke about this, the corrupt practice of circuits paying stipends directly to ministers to avoid paying assessment to the MCO. She said this is becoming an accepted practice to the circuits who are doing this. We urge you to stop it and put it to an end. Lastly, she spoke about the election of leadership, that it has become imperative and central to our integrity and authenticity as a church to work on how we understand and handle and behave around election of leadership in all structures and levels within the MCA. The culture of caucusing, it seems to be revealing divisions and further factions amongst us. And then she urged us to find better ways of doing this. I quote her, she said, for the sake of the gospel, we proclaim, we must and can do better, even on social platform. Let us do good, do no harm, and stay in love with the love of God. And unquote. And I will end there, Rev. Thank you very much. The presiding bishop's address is still available on the website. Even if you Google presiding bishop's address, it's one of the links that appears on top. Thank you very much.
So much, Michael. I appreciate your contribution. And just a reminder to us, the presiding bishop sets the theme for us all to follow. And sometimes it's nice to all be on the same page and aiming for the same direction. I think that we will add it to the list of documents to be emailed out. I'm sure many of you have seen it already. And as Michael says, you can find it on the webpage. I'm now going to hand over to our district secretary, Graham, who is going to speak about the resolutions that have been sent. He will tell us the resolutions from conference. Thanks, Graham. Over to you.
Thanks, Jenny, and thanks everyone who's joining us tonight. I just wanted to begin, before I just briefly go through the resolutions from Conference 2022, to just remind us what resolutions are, because it's a word that we throw around, and resolutions come up in quarterly meetings, they come up in synods, and we might not all be on the same page as to what exactly we are doing when we are dealing with resolutions. So resolutions are the way in which we give a voice to the needs and the concerns of the Methodist people, and how those are heard throughout the connection. We make changes to the way in which we operate as a church, the way in which we do things, by way of resolutions. So any Methodist member, through their quarterly meeting, can propose a resolution, which their quarterly meeting can carry through to their local synod. And if it's a local matter to be addressed at a district level, that resolution will either be received or rejected by the synod, or perhaps maybe through debate and discussion, the thought that carried through might be changed or altered somewhat, and the district will grapple with the issue raised and make a decision. And then we'll seek to implement that. If the concern or the desire to change something or to do something differently involves the entire church, then having gone from our quarterly meeting to the synod, that resolution, if it's agreed to by your local synod, will go to conference. Conference will then debate, discuss, and look at the resolution, what it proposes, and seek to grapple with whatever's raised, and they'll often make a decision, which can either be to receive the resolution, to reject the resolution, or to deal with the matter in a way that emerges out of the debate and discussion. So resolutions can pertain to a local level, at a district level. We can propose changes to the way we do things at a local level, at district level, or at connection level. When conference deals with matters of regulation, when conference deals with matters of our common practice together as Methodists, sometimes those things have a far-reaching effect on areas of the church's life, and in that case, conference doesn't simply just decide to accept or reject a resolution, but sends them back down to circuits for discussion and debate. So an initial proposal will come through a single quarterly meeting to synod, and then go up to conference and will be debated there. But sometimes the proposals are of such a nature that it's going to affect everyone in a very profound way. And so, to be fair, all circuits and all districts need to have a chance to grapple with the matter at hand. And so we often get resolutions referred back down from conference. This year, we're going to have 2 resolutions that are going to be referred back down from conference, and we'll be required to discuss those in our April quarterly meetings. So just to be aware that when you get a resolution from conference, you are getting a resolution that has been discussed and debated at conference. A proposal is then sent down to our circuits and our districts to get everyone's feedback, everyone's concerns raised, everyone's buy-in to the process. So that's what happens when we get resolutions from conference sent down to our quarterly meetings and to our district synods. What also happens at conference is sometimes, having gone through that process, resolutions are then adopted, or resolutions that do not need a wider consultation, that conference feels it can deal with on its own. Those resolutions will be adopted, and then we send them back for implementation. And that's what I'm going to be going through now, is that these are changes to our regulations and processes that conference has decided upon, and which we now need to implement, to take note of and to implement at our local levels. So just to note that this document has gone out to all superintendents, and again, maybe it would be the ones that we'll email out. But I'm just going to deal very briefly with each item that conference has referred us to. And I just want to make a very, very clear note, and that is that these are resolutions for noting and implementation, except for the last one. So we don't need to debate these things in our quarterly meetings. They've already been debated and decided upon by conference. We now need to implement these decisions in our life together. So the first resolution deals with unaccredited and mature age local preachers. And just to summarize the gist of this, we know that there are often local preachers in circuits who have never actually been through a process of formal training as required by a book of order for various reasons. Perhaps maybe they've been preachers for many, many years in the circuit before, and superintendents have simply inherited preachers who've never actually been formally trained. And so they're not officially recognized by the connection, but at circuit level, there are people who operate as local preachers. There are also people who want to offer as local preachers, but who, because of their age, it would be unpractical for them to be able to do formal academic studies. And so this resolution seeks to deal with this matter, that there's a period of amnesty that has been granted to preachers who are currently active in their circuits, but who have never been through formal training. These preachers need to be declared and brought within our system. There's a period of amnesty which will end, and you can see that in the resolution itself. So this is an urgent call to superintendents in particular to take a look at the local preachers in their circuit and to make sure that they are all accredited. If they're not, to contact EMMU and begin the process of formalizing their status within the church. There's also a further resolution that EMMU create some kind of training system for preachers who are over 60, who could then be exempt from the academic training required at the moment. And so EMMU have been asked to look at that. So that's the first resolution we need to note and implement. The second one is an ongoing discussion that has happened within the church, and that's the cost-effective and simplified hosting of events. We are aware that since COVID, we've had to look at our events, our conferences, our conventions differently. We're aware of the economic challenges of the church. And so this resolution seeks to address the way in which we host events. And one of the things that the Connection has decided is that we are to use our own church buildings, our own church institutions, our own halls and retreat centers as our first priority before going to commercial venues. The other thing that we need to note is that where we do need to make use of a hotel or some kind of hospitality institution, that we use 2 or 3 star graded accommodation facilities, that we do not spend the church's money to go to 4- and 5-star hotels. So we try and find the simplest but most comfortable accommodation for our people. Then also, the finance unit has been asked to please collate a database of accommodation and conferencing and catering facilities that we could use across the connection. The third resolution for noting and implementation is the support for sustainable livelihood and development through entrepreneurship. And this is to really help us to make use of people within our own church family when we need to procure services. The hope is that we would build up a database at a district level. The request is that we do so, that we develop a district database of Methodist and entrepreneurs, people who build up a database of service providers we could use in order to support those within the church family. And so that is something we would need to implement. The financing of children's ministry. Conference has affirmed the work of our children's and youth ministry. And all circuits and societies are being asked to please, and in fact instructed to please, through their treasurers, include a line item in their annual society or circuit budgets for children's ministry. That is something that needs to be implemented in our budget cycle. And the finance unit is going to be asked to amend the 4C and 4S schedules so that we'll have to declare as circuits and societies how much we are spending on youth and children's ministry to ensure that that has not been neglected. Our attention was drawn also to our photograph policy. We do have a policy in place concerning photographs and particularly protecting the rights of children. And so you are referred by this resolution to yearbook, page 219 in the 2019 yearbook, which outlines the guidelines for the publication of images relating to children. So just to be aware, if you are photographing children, there are guidelines in our yearbook. And obviously you cannot do that without parental consent. So if we can please also, if we're hosting events where children are involved, in the indemnity form, in the application form, please make sure that we have parental consent, a line for that, so that parents can give consent if they're going to be photographs taken, but also pay attention to all the other guidelines. Assistance with the cost of screening for children's ministry. So we know we have a safeguarding policy, and all those who work with children within our church need to be vetted against the sexual offences register and the child offences register. We do also recognize the financial limitations of circuits and societies. And so there is a plea that the mission unit engage the Department of Social Development and other stakeholders in the countries of our connection to explore cost-effective ways for vetting and screening religious workers. So that's to be implemented at a bigger level, but it's also just there as a reminder that although we all are financially challenged, to please include that in your budget, that you need to vet your child care, well, your children's ministry practitioners, anyone who's working with children. The other resolution was the capacitation of children's ministry practitioners. It's our new word for those who work with children, whether in Sunday school or youth groups, anyone who works with children within our church. We would want to ensure that those who work with our children are able to give the necessary help to young people, to children who are in distress, who need someone to talk to. And so the request is that at circuit level, we please make opportunities available for those who work with children to receive training in basic counseling skills so that they can respond to the needs of our young people. And that's something that can be explored at a circuit level, just to provide some skills for those who are working with children so that they have basic counseling skills, can listen and just respond appropriately and refer appropriately when a need is brought to them. Then also another resolution pertaining to children's ministry, number 8, that is just to recognize that a children's ministry takes place within the formations of the children and youth ministry unit of our church. That's Sunday school, that is Wesley Guild, that is various other sort of platforms that form part of children's and ministry child and youth unit. Children's ministry falls under there in terms of Sunday school, but we also have our junior mananos. We have children's ministry that takes place through the uniformed organizations of our church. And there is a need to create some kind of working together between those two groups who work with children. And so Conference has asked for a committee to be appointed to look into this matter and how we coordinate better between the organizations and the child and youth unit. Resolution number 9, we were asked by Conference to please find ways in our circuits to support our local schools, recognizing that our education system is a challenged space. And so all superintendent ministers and circuit ministers have been asked to please engage with their local schools to find out where the church can be a supporting presence for our schools. The stationing of supernumerary ministers, the history behind this is that there is a practice within some circuits to make use of the services of supernumerary ministers to look after societies where a minister could actually be stationed. So the idea is, instead of trying to save money by not stationing a minister and putting a supernumerary in that space instead, the connection has been quite clear that active ministers are the ones who are available for stationing. And where there is a station and a need for a minister, it is an active minister who needs to be placed in that place. It's tempting to sometimes use supernumeraries and bypass the cost involved with active ministers, but there are huge problems that creates for the church, for the ministers, and for local circuits and societies. So Conference has reminded us of our policy that we are to desist from their practice and only use supernumeraries as supporting agents, not as a replacement for active ministers in our circuits. The last one, and I referred to that beforehand, this is a resolution that is going to come down for discussion at our April quarterly meetings. And this is the whole discussion that is taking place within the church at the moment about ukutwasa and the practice of being a traditional healer within the MCSA. And particularly, the question is, how do we deal with particularly ministers, ordained ministers, who also have an ancestral calling as well to the practice of being a traditional healer? Can the two coexist with one another, or is this a conflict? And that's the question that's been posed. What's happened is DUCOM have been asked to develop a discussion document to help us to engage with African spirituality and also to engage with ukutwasa and the practice of traditional healing, and how this matches with the gospel, with our own understanding of the Christian faith, and also our understanding of ordained ministry. So this is to open up a conversation within the church. so their conference can make an informed decision, so that it is very clear how ministers with an ancestral calling are to proceed, and in what way this is going to influence their ministry. So the conversation needs to be had, and this is sort of the resolution that's before you is just a first step in outlining the things that need to be discussed. And DUCOM will be sending us a discussion document for our April quarterly meetings where that can be engaged with at a circuit level, and we'll also be engaging with the same discussion document at a district level at our synod. So those are the resolutions that have been referred back to us. Note that all of them, except the last one, are for noting and implementation. Please don't discuss them at your quarterly meetings. You'll be using time for something that has already been decided upon. But the last one is for discussion at April. So when the discussion document comes out from DUCOM, I'll make it available to all superintendents as soon as I get it. And then it's to take to your quarterly meetings. It's up to you how to discuss that document, whether you want to break a quarterly meeting up into small groups and get feedback. I just want to make it clear that when we get a paper like the one we're expecting from when we get a paper like the one we're expecting around ukutwasa and the practice of traditional healing, we need to do two things at our circuit quarterly meetings. One, we need to discuss it, capture comments, feedback, and thoughts, and clearly send those back to the district office. But we also need a general feeling of your meeting on whether we are accepting the proposal or rejecting. Conference will be looking for an accept or a reject from all of our circuits. Or should your vote or your consensus be split, you may give in a neutral response. But we would need some kind of indicator as to where you're leaning around the proposal, either accept, neutral, or reject the discussion paper that you receive, together with comments and thoughts. I do need to also say that conference is sending back down to us, along with the resolution around ukutwasa and the practice of traditional healing, and the harassment policy, which our quarterly meetings would have discussed last year. They just want a final go through of that policy and just to capture any further thoughts or recommendations for that policy. And conference would like to also just have a sense from each circuit that that policy has been accepted by our quarterly meetings, or rejected as you decide. So their policy has been backwards and forwards in order to refine it and shape it. It's an important policy, so it's had to go through a period of consultation. It'll come back down to us again for our April quarterly meetings, the harassment policy, and you can just, as a quarterly meeting, indicate your approval or your disapproval with comment. Particularly if it's a disapproval, we would need some comments. And then that's my story. Sorry, that was a lot of info all at once, but friends, yeah, particularly superintendents or circuit stewards are welcome to contact me if they need any further clarity. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you so much, Graham. Graham speaks from bitter experience of having to try to put together a synod report where the circuits have not responded. So please hear his cry. And you all now have lots of advance warnings. So if you don't know anything about ukutwasa, you've got a chance to go and find out about it to have a meaningful discussion at your CQM. We are scheduled to go until 8:30. So Lester, I'm going to invite you to come and do your presentation. Please don't feel that you need to run away. There is only one question I think that needs to be answered. And just to say that our mission coordinator, Reverend Salom Zikhalo, has been trying to join but has internet issues. So he does send his apologies. He would have liked to be here as well. Thank you, Lester.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Just to check. Alrighty, there we are. Fantastic. Friends, I want to just respect our time as well, but I will do what I need to do with this particular presentation. Thankful for the opportunity, of course, to share in this particular space with each and everyone who's present. So stemming from around the year 2012 in particular, the MCSA, particularly within the Cape of Good Hope specifically, according to the best of my knowledge, we've really began to ask the question and to seek answers to the question of those moments in crises or disaster moments, as we tend to refer them to. Many impacted individuals across various of these settlements and those who have been negatively impacted have at some point in time or the other asked the question, where is the church? And certainly stemming from a lot of my experience and as well as Reverend Ralph Afghan at the time, we began to dream about what does it look like within the context of our particular circuits, being in a position to have or to be in a degreed state of readiness. And I say degreed because things are always taken in flux, basically. There's always a degree of perpetuality, varying degrees of levels of crises or disasters particularly. And so before everyone this evening, of course, you'll see that this particular plan, which is dated 2020, has been put before Synod and has been accepted as the current working plan that the circuits within our district are called towards in themselves. It's a very plain document. It's a very descriptive document in itself. It's power-packed, although it must be said that there is a deep dive onto many of these particular responses. So on what I can see on my screen, which is to my left, of course, you'll see that it states flooding and fire particular. And I'll speak to that in a moment. But what is particularly quite good within this particular plan is that we have thought through this particular plan, not only from the perspective of the Methodist Church, of course, within the district. It also purports itself to take into consideration the geographic positioning of other denominations. And that's a critical aspect of what this plan is also about. It on the one end, of course, also firstly speaks to our response as Methodists. And so you'll see that within a geographic of at least 100 kilometers from the Synod office, most of our circuits are covered. There should be 18 of them on this particular diagram. The 19th one, of course, which is in the block should be outlying circuits, is stated as Namakwaland as part of our district, of course, which is a point of different conversation given their geographic of being more than at least 100 kilometers outside of our immediate geographic from our circuit, our district office per se, which has ramifications, but in itself, there is again a deep dive towards us working ecumenically. And so in 2020, specifically at the MCENI gathering that we had, the mission unit and the ecumenical unit, we had deep conversations. This particular plan was put forward to them as well as a measured response, that the way in which the Methodist Church of Southern Africa, as a way of being able to work across the entire connection, in fact, was even put forward. But of course, that's for a different conversation. We here in the Cape of Good Hope district work according to this particular plan. And what that does, as you can see in terms of your breakdown, it really is the neighboring circuit as best as is possible. One of the thinkings behind this particular grouping in itself is that there, again, are those circuits who may have sufficient physical resources or practical way of being able to donate versus those who may not always be able to. So if I look at it as a quick hand example, so I'm presently in the Cape Gateway circuit, and Cape Gateway is paired with Pearl Valley. And so because of where we are at geographically, we link ourselves to Pearl Valley, and Pearl Valley may have one or two societies that may be in a position to assist, because there are areas such as Mokweni in the Pearl Valley circuit that usually has a bout of fires in particular, and there have been moments of flooding as well. And so one of the responsibilities that myself as desk facilitator or coordinator has is to, of course, to nurture the conversation, not only within the Methodist Church, within the circuits, but I also have to nurture conversations with other denominations, because mission is done ecumenically. There is some deep dives involved in that as well, but it simply makes sense that in our various contexts, it's not only the Methodist Church that is present. We have a shared ministry, a shared joint ministry, particularly around disasters or crises per se. One of the things that I've also put forward is the fact that when we as Methodists, or when we as the people of God are always asked and speaking about our response to disaster, our response to disasters or crises comes from a deep moment and a deep conviction towards God's calling us towards a missional response. It's something that I actually quite enjoy, to be quite honest, in just the way in which all churches are, in particular, coming out of this whole COVID scenario as well, have found that this particular way of working makes sense. There are some of you on this call who may or may not have heard the term LEANS, as in Local Ecumenical Action Networks. And so a lot of that particular processes has come because of this particular type of thinking, that circuits who are geographically closer to each other have a way of being able to communicate with each other quite quickly, depending on the size of the incident or the size of the disaster. So I use the term incident interchangeably with crises or disasters, simply because of the classification of the type and the size of the incident. In terms of the city of Cape Town, with whom we are in partnership with, or with whom we are a supportive agency, there is no memorandum of understanding, so we are more of a supportive agency in terms of when moments of crises hit. You'll find that, as an example, on the top end of your screen, there's the circuits Wynberg, Fish-Hoek, Heathfield, and Victoria Road. One of those aspects is that, as you have noticed over the last few months particularly, and over the trajectory of at least the last 3 to 4 to 5 years, is that some of our friends up in places like Masiphumelele, which has been quite frequent in the news, and occasionally Imizamo Yethu, as being fairly large informal settlements, have had their fair share of fire, particularly fire incidents. Some of them have been declared as official disasters, simply because more than 1,000 plus people have been negatively impacted. And then, of course, there's been simply declared a crisis moment because there's less than, say, 600 people, and depending on the veracity or the size or just the size of the incident. And so there's lots of technicalities to this particular type of thinking that goes into the disaster plan specifically. What is to be known by the circuit stewards is what I really want to focus on. Given what is before you this evening, I really wish to encourage individuals to really try and get hold of me through the office of the bishop, of course. You can contact Letitia for my details. Of course, we can always put it onto this particular group if need be. That we have deep conversations, because this particular plan has helped spur on other denominations, particularly, as well as I do go around having conversations with other denominations as part of my responsibility. And what that does, it's really just to help capacitate the church and church networks through the Western Cape Council of Churches, also on behalf of the South African Council of Churches as well, because of a lot of the technicalities that goes on in and around what happens to those who are negatively impacted. And by way of example, a few moments ago, you would have heard Graham speak about the need for child practitioners to really be registered or to be checked on the register. I think that is Form 30B, if I'm not mistaken. So within the context of a disaster, when any individual from the church is wishing or willing to be a participant within the response to a disaster, even there, you will find that inevitably you will come across individuals such as children. And we have this tendency as donors are always asking the question, can you take photographs? And so it's a very serious matter that you don't just go onto a site or an incident site, particularly thinking that you can just go ahead and take photographs that pleases your donors of food, your donors of clothing, etc. But that you are sensitive to the fact that inevitably, whenever children are in the vicinity of a fire or a disaster site, and when there are moments when individuals who are coming from the outside wanting to help, there is a tendency of children to want to be present as well in and around those individuals. And so one is very careful around these particular moments. And so really the request for myself as well, please be in touch with myself, because there is a scheduled manner as to how we respond. Critical to our response, and I'm sure that this particular process will be shared within the documents, is that the point number 3, which is on the top left-hand corner, it says that disaster response, 48 to 60 hours. And what does that infer then to us? It was really the fact that we are not practiced, or we're not skilled as being firefighters or ones who come in and assist with dredging work or drainage work for that matter. That's left to the skilled and mandated officials, which are your disaster risk management officials. We are really, as a church, saying we are a supportive agency. And so the basis of our decision making is Holy Spirit discernment. And that 48 to 60 hours, which is a 2.5 day period, really allows us the moments to actually then appropriately discern and discuss what level of relief is actually going to make a real difference. Please do note that we are not the only agents who are physically present in a disaster site. There are other agencies like your Muslim judicial agencies, there's a whole host of other humanitarian relief organizations specifically. And for that reason, we enter into conversation with each other along with the disaster risk management centers official to see what is the most appropriate relief items that can be done. And what then happens is that we go back to the affected circuits and share with them, this is what is actually the best way forward to really help those individuals that have been negatively impacted. And that's the reason for the 48 to 60 hours lapse time after the fire or the flood, specifically within our context as the Western Cape. That's the thinking in itself. As we only move in to effect relief, we do not enter into the situation to build dependency. And so there's a lot of training and there's a lot of thinking that goes on in and around our response, our measured response into a disaster specifically. Lastly, I wish to honor the time. It's really, again, as you can see, the grouping specifically around the particular circuits that are joined particularly, which is geographic. It's based on the fact of a number of informal settlements in and around that particular areas per se. I use the example of Cape West Coast. You're talking to Noon as an example, as the major settlement that is being negatively impacted, because it's also growing. You've got Belleville Circuit and Table Bay Circuit that have the ability to affect some level of relief based again on the size of an incident specifically. Although it also said that there are other denominations who similarly Also, I have the ability to plan, to respond effectively. So I think for now, without me saying too much more, Jen, I wish to probably just leave it there with the last proviso that I would plead with individuals herein. Please do get in touch with me. There is some deep thinking and training that is happening in and around the district as it is. So that will be very, very helpful that we as the Methodist Church join in with some of the other trainings that is happening denominationally as well. I wish to leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lester. And Lester is passionate about this, and we have got this. We have got the theory, and we need to get it all together. Each circuit should have a mission coordinator. If your mission coordinator is not active, perhaps you need to go to your superintendent and volunteer. But thank you so much, Lester, and thank you to all of our speakers. We have got 10 minutes. I'm going to give the poor bishop 10 minutes to answer a question, talk about yearbooks, and generally wrap up. I'm just going to see if I can bring the question that we're going to ask her just to briefly try and cover. But yes, over to you, Bishop. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been amazing. I want to say just the level of inputs and questions. Of course, the exciting is when we deal with questions. Let me just jump in. It's of course difficult because, I can't answer all of that. But the question came when the presentation of stationing came. And I think the two were asked in conversation with each other. What are the parameters regarding funding? And secondly, can we have partnerships? I'm not sure if it's the two and whether the question is there value in circuits exploring how do we, look at ensuring that we are able to cover the costs of agents as such. Jenny outlined very clearly, where those costs come from, how we look at that. So there's two parts of it. The one is funding as whole, and I think our district treasurer will be doing a workshop quite soon in terms of funding. And so I would want to leave that, but there are parameters in terms of the kind of funding investments we can make. But I think the question is are there ways in which we can look at partnering in terms of stationing of agents, whether they be Bible women, evangelists, and so forth? And yes, there are. One, I need to say two things. One, we are part of the CUC, which is the Church Unity Commission, which means we have, if I can call it, agreements with particular churches, Anglican, Congregational, Presbyterian, and some others, in which, for instance, our ordination is recognized, our confirmation. So it's possible for a Methodist minister to be stationed, let me say very broadly, within an Anglican church or a congregational minister. Those are set partnerships. However, those who are not part of the formal CUC agreements, that could become a little challenging, because remember, ultimately a Methodist a presbyter or minister, as we said, falls under the discipline and the order of the Methodist Church of Southern Africa, as would a deacon and other agents. But we have very exciting partnerships. So, for instance, we have four circuits, if we want to say. We've got an exciting partnership between Blue Downs and Stellenbosch, for instance, where they sought collectively to have a probationer appointed. And they've been modeling for us what it could look like should two circuits look at how could we possibly share. And then we have Victoria Road and Heathfield sharing in a partnership, and an evangelist who is there. So yes, there are other ways of looking how we can best place agents for mission, extending mission within our boundaries. I think a little more difficult if you create partners with churches that are not in formal agreements with ourselves, because ultimately, under who does that minister for? Even in partnering circuits, that minister, that little page that Jenny showed from our yearbook, where a minister is stationed, you can only be stationed formally. You've got to find yourself next to a station. And so a minister may be stationed in one circuit, but that circuit is sharing with another. In other words, cost of manse. Maybe if they're sharing in ministry, this minister is responsible for those two societies. The challenge, of course, is the minister needs to, and evangelist needs to attend to, quarterly meetings, leaders meetings, and so forth. So yes, there is scope for that. Probably a little bit too difficult to answer here. With other denominations, I think a little more difficult, to enter into those formal ones, but with conversations, that you may want to look at as such. I've tried to answer that as briefly as possible. I hope I'm answering the question as it came. The other was not a question that came. I don't know, Jenny, if I can jump in, but a number of times we've made references to resolutions, to the Book of Order in terms of various matters, prescribes how we do this, the presiding bishop's address and so forth. I'm holding up a picture. The Methodist yearbook is available now. Already all ministers have received their copies of those. And so we want to say to circuit stewards, society stewards, these can be ordered in bulk. Say a church wants to order in bulk. There is a website from the bulk site in which they can be ordered. This is not for your one-on-one copy, but should a church or a circuit decide they want to buy, I'm not sure what the limit is or maximum or minimum, but say they decide they want to supply all society stewards with a yearbook, they can do so through these. There's a particular, and I think Jenny might share it on the screen, or individual copies can be bought at various book sites. At the moment, the one that comes to mind immediately is Scripture Union Bookshop, which is in the Rondebosch area. But there we go, bulk orders there, and inquiries can go there. It's worth looking because all the documents, some of these documents were presented and therefore available on the MCSA book site. But I want to say the yearbook is not online. That can only be bought. Hard copy, that has to do with our licensing agreement. The other one, which we always say to circuit stewards, society stewards, you should be in possession of the Methodist Book of Order. And this is available online. The interesting news is there is a new one coming out later this year. So you may want to simply download it, maybe not quite yet invest in it, unless you've got some money, but you can buy one, or this can be downloaded, which will outline all the processes. Very important tools. Methodist, we always have our hymn book, we have our Bible, we have our Book of Order, and we have our yearbook. When we go to synods and conference, we always have a pile of books with us, either that or on our laptops and so forth. And I think that's all I want to say, but I've just been so impressed. The presentations have been excellent. And I think we will keep doing refresher courses. I'm sure Jenny would do that because we want to ensure our people are well equipped to take their leadership seriously. Jenny, back over to you. I hope that's all you wanted.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Grant, it's gone. Okay. I forgot what I was going to say. Apart from saying the grace, our next meeting in this format will be the 7th of June. So if you want to hang on to that. And the next one in person is the 25th of February. I think it is the last Saturday of February, as Michael mentioned, our lay leader, which will be at Goodwood Methodist Church. So if you need to be in person and you want to discuss, come along on the 25th. And then the next module in this refresher set will be on the 7th of June. I think we're going to close, and you can see that there are so many people online. They've all put their questions and where you come from, and it's wonderful. We see you all. We cannot hold your hands, but we are one in spirit with you, and we're going to say the grace. And now may the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all, now and forevermore. Amen. May God bless us all in our ministries.